Hello everybody and welcome to another video. My name is Santino and today we're going to be doing a book review for the novella Minority Report by Philip K. Dick. Now at 103 pages, which are large type, it's a quick read and it's definitely worth taking a look at. Some interesting aspects of this book are its retro-futuristic approach, its dystopian world, its instigating paranoia, and its mystery elements. So let's jump in. The plot of this work centers around Anderton, who's a senior pre-crime officer. He lives in a future where murder has not occurred for 5 years. Through the use of precogs, who are three individuals that have precognition or the ability to see things before they happen, they're able to target criminals before crimes occur. Anderton is the system's main enforcer until one day when his own name appears as a murder suspect. Following this revelation, Anderton must escape those who want to arrest him. He sets out to find who framed him and why. In a militarized and highly surveilled state, it becomes unlikely that he will evade capture in his quest to find the truth. The author. To talk a little bit about Philip K. Dick, he was born December 16, 1928 in Chicago, Illinois. He attended the University of California, Berkeley for only couple months before leaving, so he does not come from an academic background. No matter the setting, I find his work to be distinctively Californian. He struggled with mental illness for parts of his life. There's a kind of mythology that survives around Philip K. Dick, centered on his countercultural life and his interesting spiritual and futuristic views. He wrote 36 novels and 5 short story collections. The author died in 1982 in Santa Ana, California. He won 2 awards for the Best Novel of the Year. One was a Hugo Award in 1962, and one was a John W. Campbell Memorial Award in 1974. The first was for The Man in the High Castle, and the second was for Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said. Let's jump into the design on this particular book. I don't always talk about the design of books, but with this one, it's obviously unique. It's in a vertical format with the binding at the top. So it references, at least in part, notebooks that you might see a police officer or detective using. Except unlike those notebooks, this one is bigger. It's not as miniature as those versions. And for this reason, it can be a little bit awkward to read. It does have type on on both sides of the page, so as you're reading it, you're holding it like this. So I would say that it's a little bit awkward, though the design is cool. The type is very large. If a smaller font were used, I could see this easily fitting onto about 50 pages because it is a novella. The design's great artistic. I like the futuristic elements that it shows, especially like this one in the back, which is a cool design of like a barcode that's sort of like replicating. I wish that this was horizontally bound a little bit. I feel like this would have been a little bit definitely easier to read, but it would have taken away from the design element of it looking like a detective's notebook and the idiosyncrasy that the designers intended by this. So the world. This is a dystopian novel, so it depicts a futuristic world which has been destroyed or damaged. The destruction in this book seems to be caused primarily by the fictional Anglo-Chinese War. The future of this book involves at least 2 habitated planets. We are likely in New York on Earth, as Central Park is mentioned around page 53, though it is never implicitly stated that we are in New York. The setting is described often as colorless, gloomy, and somber. From page 45, I quote, "tumbled miles of cheap hotels and broken tenements, which are observed in a large view of the city." It's a colorless setting as well. A pistol is the only notable object I found to be described by its color, which was blue. Blue in and of itself can be a somber color. For instance, when people say, "I'm feeling blue." Blue also has connotations of sky or water. In a metaphorical sense, this may signify that the pistol has a great importance, just as those large-scaling images that we have in our minds do. And therefore, the pistol is ubiquitous or essential to this world, and by relation, so is violence. The writing style. Simple, good vocab, but repetitive. Like many science fiction works, I feel that the subject matter of the book surpasses the writing style. While the prose is not bad by any means, the paragraph, sentence, and chapter structure, along with the word choice, doesn't particularly stand out to me. The choice of words can be a bit awkward at times, such as the use of the noun descent lift on page 7. So this is basically overcomplicated. Instead of using the more accessible choice elevator, the word descent lift is used, where it just could have been substituted out. Another quote, "You almost got away with it," Fleming interrupted inexorably, highlights another occasional awkwardness, in this case the use of ly adjectives repetitively in dialogue. Occasional awkwardness, and this was heightened in this instance by the use of the alliteration with the ly adjective. Now, with all this aside, I find the writing to be effective and clear through the book when describing images and creating the mood. Themes. There's a mix of outmoded and futuristic affectations and products throughout the text, which I find interesting. This is by no means steampunk, but it can be seen as retrofuturism, which I think is unique to the work. For instance, Anderton is noted lighting a pipe on page 5. This is unique considering he exists within a technologically advanced society that has surpassed murder, yet there is still the use of tobacco or another smoking equivalent. Another is present on page 45. When Anderton is hiding out, there's a radio in his room that is operated by inserting quarters into the slots. Then on page 99, at the end of the story, the opposite case is observed. The use of atomic appliances is mentioned, which obviously sounds futuristic, though the word appliance attaches that retro feel. The second theme within the work is of large government organizations. The police force and the army have executive control over the populace in this narrative and make decisions for the general population that they are not informed of, that they have direct control over the freedom of and their way of life. This big brother nature, reminiscent of George Orwell's 1984, generates a feeling of anxiety and paranoia and ultimately leads to much of the conflict in the narrative. It especially is apparent in the protagonist Anderton, who distrusts every character he encounters throughout the course of the story, and especially noteworthy on numerous occasions his distrust is actually validated. It can be speculated that a government that relies heavily on surveillance and militarization naturally leads to this kind of paranoia, distrust and anxiety in its general populace. As a side note, much of this paranoia existed implicitly in Philip K. Dick's own life. He had a belief that the government was tracking him, especially following a breaking and entering of his home. Final thoughts. My big takeaways are the retro-futuristic style created by this work, the trepidation of a hyper-surveilled society and a police state have implications in our modern world, where this can become a worry for us as technology advances. I have some unanswered questions about the story. First, the protagonist, Anderton, introduces the precogs. He describes them as 3 idiots babbling and fumbling creatures with no spiritual needs. There was no amendment of this initial demarcation, and I find that it reflects more than an anomaly. Similarly, at the end of the book, there is no resolution concerning the police state. Yes, the army is impeded, but the police force is still existent. This, I find, implies that justice was not found for those who were wrongly convicted or for the precogs. I find that this half-justice is an interesting aspect of the story, and a more in-depth study of the work may find interesting answers to these questions. Recommendations. I have 3 recommendations for you. Of all the works of Philip K. Dick I have read, I especially like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the inspiration behind the film Blade Runner. It was the first work by Philip K. Dick that I read, so that may be partly my bias, but is the one that I have liked the most. Second of all, I recommend Minority Report, which is the film that Steven Spielberg directed that's inspired by this novella. The film has a lot of extra plot lines and elaboration. Some of these can be very sentimental, but for the most part, I find them to be effective and very interesting aesthetically and conceptually. My last recommendation will be work by Michael Swanwick. He is an author combining fantasy and science fiction. It is what I would characterize as medieval futurism. There is also a similarly bizarre factor in Swanwick as in Philip K. Dick's writing. Okay, everybody, so that's going to be my review for Minority Report by Philip K. Dick. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and keep writing. See you next time.